we're here with Sheikh Yaser Birjas. Assalamu
alaikum.
So this is going to be a little bit different from any of the other promotional videos. I had a couple questions. We just actually recorded a promo video, not so much a promo video, to talk about what Sheikh Yaser is going to be covering. And being the non-academic individual that I am, I had a bunch of questions. So we figured we'd make this a nice little tag-along conversation with a couple questions. Behind the camera is Ammar, but he doesn't want to turn it around. And we have here with Sheikh Yaser. So basically 3 questions. Question number 1 is for Sheikh Yaser, is what's the difference, or what does it mean when you're talking about contemporary method of teaching usool al-fiqh versus traditional?
Okay, so when it comes to contemporary method of teaching usool al-fiqh, you know how things developed, from the past. The ulama, they have their own style, their own what we call the classical works of usool al-fiqh, versus then the modern style. The modern style, since we have the challenge of secularism and how the law has been presented and be organized and so on, many of the contemporary usool al-fiqh that kind of accommodating to this kind of new style of teaching usool in order to draw parallels between the classical work and the modern work of on the subject of law, because usul fiqh is the theory of law. That's what it is exactly. But it's of course done from the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and of course from logic, and some, to a certain extent, some ulama, they use philosophical discussions, of course, to incorporate in works of usul. So if you're going to be studying usul fiqh the classical way, you're going to be going all the way back to these very, very traditional principles of usul. Maybe not as sophisticated as it is today, because the theory of law developed until it became perfect and complete. But before that, you're going to be studying like a sense of history, really, on how usul fiqh was developed and what the ulama were discussing at that time, and why they were discussing these things, as a primary principles of usul, versus later on when the ulama developed new theories into new active principles in the theory of law. So again, it's very crucial, and that's the point I would like to make over for people. With those who would like to study usul fiqh, in order to appreciate what they have today, they're going to have to go back to see how it all started and why it became so complete and perfect today.
Okay, so actually this brings back to another question. This is going to be 4 questions, in fact. So when you talk about looking at the traditional, and you get to see the history of the development of the law, how's that different from like the evolution of fiqh or the history of fiqh, or is that an aspect of the course itself?
Yeah, the code of or the evolution of fiqh speaks about the historical factors that shaped the history of law in Islam, meaning the factors that led to the emergence of the ulama, Muslim scholars, institutions of fiqh, and so on. So there wasn't much discussion on the theory of law by itself. It was just a historical factor on the development of madhahib and so on. Studying the classical works of usul, we're not going to be studying the history of the madhahib. No, we're going to be studying the actual usul al-fiqh. Well, when it comes to be, of course, more specific, Matn al-Waraqat by Imam al-Juwayni rahimahullah ta'ala is considered more of the jumhur style of usul al-fiqh, because there are 2 kinds of major usuls. We have the majority of Muslim scholars, which is known as the mutakallimin, and that would include the Maliki, the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali school in general. And then we have the Hanafi style of fiqh, of usul fiqh, basically. So this one actually represents the majority's principles of usul. That doesn't mean
which is not Hanafi.
Which is not Hanafi, but doesn't mean it doesn't overlap.
Okay.
Because overall they share a lot of these principles and usuls, but the organization of the usul is a little bit different. So those who would like to see, we're going to basically maybe make some comparisons between the Hanafi and the majority's, principles of usul. Allah.
Okay. So then this brings to the question of, all right, so you get to see the history and the development, this being the summary. Is there an advantage or of studying traditional way versus looking at it in the contemporary method?
Anyone who wants to become or aspire to become a student of knowledge, or at least understand the language of the students of knowledge, you have to study some of those classical works of usul and works of fiqh and other principles of ulum sharia. It's just like, when you go to college, you have to speak the language of that class, that degree that you're going to be acquiring. Similarly, if you would like to sit with students of knowledge, if you'd like to study with ulama and scholars, if you'd like at least to understand what they're talking about, then you're going to have some sense of exposure to the principles, where they got the skill from. So as an aspiring student of knowledge, it's very crucial and very important that you learn that, inshallah ta'ala, so that you have an idea and you could realize, where they're learning and using the terminology that they're using actually from.
Would it be fair to say that if one looks at the contemporary method, the thought process is already constructed, right? There's like, this is the process, this is how you consume this and understand it, versus the traditional method, it helps you develop that thought process?
It does, absolutely. I mean, you see, today, this is basically a history of almost 1,500 years of development. So the theory is kind of like almost perfect in that sense. However, one thing not so many people understand and realize, that usool al-fiqh perhaps is one of the most human disciplines in Islamic sciences. Why? Because it's almost man-made. It's all ulama deriving these rules and principles from the Quran and Sunnah, putting it in their own words, and then there were a lot of debates over them, if they were right or wrong. And as a result of that, the ulama, they differed on their principles, following their own basic methodologies and so forth. Ulama, they start championing for these principles until they develop different schools of thoughts. So all of this happened, throughout the history of 1,500 years. Where it all started, we go back to the classics. So we go back from there and see what are the main issues that led to the future debates, that led to the usool fiqh being developed in a certain way as we see it today.
Well, there you have it, folks. That answers my questions. Ammar, you have any? He's staying quiet.
Jazakallah khair. Khair, inshallah.
All right, guys. So that's it for IlmSummit. And that's what Sheikh Yaser Birjas is going to be covering it. So that's what you, if you have any questions, let us know. Put it in the comments below. And if I see you at IlmSummit, don't be shy. Say hi. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.